Hi, I'm Dave Hamilton with Hamilton Risk and Value Consultants out of Seattle. I own my own firm and I do consulting services on large civil engineering projects, and I've recently become a user of the Saffron Risk Tool. I found that quantitative risk analysis takes one step further from classic qualitative risk analysis with just spreadsheets with red and green cells that give people a visual indication. But by going one step further into quantitative, we can actually find out what the true impact is in absolute dollars and approximate schedule durations. I find that using quantitative risk analysis takes your analysis one level higher and allows you to actually look and put a number and a duration on risk elements. And from there, the main advantage is take a look at that risk and actually look for ways to mitigate it. That's the end function that the risk analysis does. We need to find out what the risk is, what the impact is, and then what do we do about it. With the Saffron Risk piece of software, I find that I can look at top-down, bottom-up type of risk analysis. And from that, look at the risk exposure, identify what sort of percentage probabilities we want to look at for achieving the end schedule and budget, and from that point adjust the contingency on a stripped down schedule and stripped down cost estimate to identify a reasonable projection for the project. In dealing with groups doing risk analysis, and this is primarily where I do most of my consulting work, you've got to be very sensitive of people and their emphasis on projects and listen very, very carefully. So we try to do things very much as a group, a committee. Everyone needs to have a common voice. So my rule is every comment about a risk all gets recorded, and the nomenclature is reviewed then immediately with the person that spoke up with that risk. We try to capture things from all sides, from operations through construction to overall management of the project. Type of projects I typically look at are heavy civil engineering projects, federally funded, possibly state funded, and most of these have requirements to do risk analysis and typically quantitative risk analysis. Those could be a light rail subway project, a tunnel, a large water treatment plant, and in using the risk tools, we can identify through quantitative measures project reliability for both schedule and for cost. When I look for the variable tools that we can use in doing risk analysis from qualitative through quantitative, time seems to be the biggest factor. We've got to have a tool that's fairly succinct, something I can do in a large group setting. And oftentimes it's not unusual to have maybe 1 hour or 2 hours allocated for risk analysis. So it's got to be very quick. Some of the tools on the market go from qualitative all the way through to the more complex. The more complex ones take days, if not weeks, to set up. I need something that's fairly quick and easy to use, and I found that with Saffron Risk. In the end, most users are looking to quantify their risk, to mitigate them, and to save construction time as well as construction dollars. I tend to focus on the identification of the risk, but more importantly, what do you do about that risk once you are aware of it? And that brings you into the mitigation realm. Mitigation leads to brainstorming leads to the value engineering process, and I have found integrating the risk analysis with the value engineering to search for a solution is the best end product. Combined, it's not unusual where people will find repetitively savings in the investment in time of, say, 20 to 1 or 30 to 1. Federal government has found that in any number of projects, so that's fairly well documented. Risk analysis in most of the clients that I work for, which would be agencies, they could be a large transit agency in Houston or Seattle or New York, they're looking for results. And risk analysis now is starting to come into its own realm, and they're including it in consulting services from design engineers on through construction managers. So the need is there. People feel there is validity in including that and in allocating resources to it. So I see that market is really increasing, and this ability to use risk analysis tools takes it to a higher level, and it's very believable by internal MBA types, the accounting staff, financial people. They especially see some real benefits in doing it, as well as the public, since we've got to operate in a very transparent environment now in the public sector. Nowadays, the executive levels and most of the large organizations are looking for benchmarking issues. They're very much attuned with some of the new tools, key project indicators, KPIs, and they're looking for whether projects are on budget, whether they're running long, whether they're over budget, under budget. Doing a risk analysis gives them a good predictor. They can look ahead and see how their project is doing. You can include as-built information into that as the project moves along. It gives them updated information. So the tool appears to be fairly flexible with Saffron Risk, and you can do not only predictions, you can always load in real-time cost and schedule information also. People like myself involved with risk analysis think very graphically as well as numerically, and we do wake up in the middle of the night thinking of solving a problem, and oftentimes it takes those sort of inspirations in unison with working with large groups and teams. So it's got to be very communal. Other people have valid solutions, valid opinions. Risk analysis is definitely one thing where a communal, collaborative environment is really needed. Once that is done, we can look kind of a well-rounded group of solutions and risk and make sure that we've analyzed the project at the very fullest. In the future, I'd like to see risk analysis tools become more user-friendly. I think our terms as an industry need to be fairly succinct. Training has to be done, much like other tools that have come to the surface. But primarily, we need possibly a certification process that might help, in which people attending risk seminars and risk workshops have some background. So at least they know the definitions of probabilities, kurtosis, other issues. Give them a little background and familiarity. That definitely will speed up the process. One recent project, which is somewhat notable, just my own professional experience, a recent project I did up in Canada on a water treatment plant. Very surgical level of review, replacement of intricate parts. Some of the pipelines had to be taken offline and then brought back on after full disinfection. So very difficult phasing. Spaces for the contractor was very, very tight. By looking at each of these activities, generally with some independent consultants as well as the design consultant, we'd identified that the overall schedule was quite tight and needed to be expanded by about 20%. And likewise, productivity rates for the activities for removal and replacement of some of this equipment was going to be much, much higher than installation for new work. And that also brought the overall construction cost estimate up by about 15 or 20%. That was really good information and useful information to the owner, not necessarily that they wanted to see the cost rise and the schedule be extended. It gave them better information. And the specifications then could be modified to make some allowances for the contractor's extra time. For companies that don't have a risk analysis program or access to risk analysis professionals, I would really recommend that they take things in steps. First, sit down, organize a risk register, and there's a lot of examples online. It could be color-coded, but think about your project. What can happen? The good and the bad. How is it driven? Is it a very high probability of happening? Is it a very major impact? And take a look at some of the key parameters. The cost, schedule, possibly quality, overall performance, all of those can be rated. And it can just be a level of red, yellow, green. But that analysis alone, in conjunction with mitigation, without identifying mitigation, you have done nothing. You've done good, solid analysis. It's got to be given some legs. It's got to be monitored in the future with action plans and monitored on possibly a monthly basis to manage that risk and make it go away.